Okay, I realise it's 12:30, you probably more than listen to me, you'd probably prefer to be sitting somewhere eating. So I'll keep this short and to the point. Firstly, just to say that to speak publicly is probably one of the most difficult things to do. There are many people who are famous for public speaking, and they generally say the same thing. They make it look easy, but they always say how difficult it is. And so I think the art of public speaking is not getting to a point that is easy, because I'm not sure that it ever is easy. And even if you come up here 100 times, I think you're still going to be quite nervous in doing it. I think the point is maybe just to become more comfortable with that nervousness you feel. And if you look at great athletes, they actually say that one of the things that gives them the edge is that nervousness. And I think it's starting to use that nervousness as your friend, and it's something that can catapult you to greatness in terms of the way that you speak. I think you have to think about public speaking in the context of the way in which you're public speaking. And in the context here, if you look at someone like Barack Obama, I'm sure a lot of you have seen Steve Jobs in his inauguration speech. You would have listened to people historically like Martin Luther King and JFK. Well, you can take something away from them, but their situation is fundamentally different to yours. They're not competing. When Barack Obama is standing there to speak, it is only Barack Obama. There aren't 9 speakers before Barack Obama, and Barack Obama has to stand out. Of course, he would stand out. There are not 9 speakers before Steve Jobs, although there will be introduction speakers. It's really, he is the keynote speaker, and everyone wants to listen to him. So, as much as you can take away from them in terms of the way that they speak, you have to understand that this is a public speaking competition, and it's very different. So I think in order to win this competition, you really have to ask some fundamental questions. And I think one of those questions is, what is your message? If you're not clear what your message is, then the audience are not going to be clear either. And as much as it pains me to say this, when the judges were speaking, we said probably from today's speeches, we may remember 3 or 4 people, but at the end of the day, there was really only one speech that we will remember and come back in a week's time. If you ask any of the judges, and indeed the audience, not the parents and the people who came, because they will remember your speech and they were here for you. But if it's the audience X who doesn't know you, how will they remember you? And I think this is a question you have to ask. So, let's start with some basics. How did you dress in a way that you will be remembered? So, you dressed in black, and Steve Jobs might have dressed in black, but you're not Steve Jobs. So to dress like Steve Jobs is something, but I will remember because I'm using this as an example. But if I didn't use it as an example, there was nothing that would stand out. I'll remember Catalina because she's wearing a bright pink jacket. One of the things I remember about Oscar Wilde is the flamboyancy in the way he dressed. When he came into the room, before he even spoke, you'd be affronted by the way that that person dressed. If no one else is wearing a bow tie, and one person is wearing a bow tie, then that person is going to stand out. There's nothing generally that I would refer to as overdressed. There is always something underdressed. But if you notice that there's 6 other people wearing a bow tie, see, this is where you have to think wise. If you've just seen 3 people speak in front of you and they were all wearing a bow tie, what are you going to do? Drop the bow tie. You're just going to be the 4th bow tie speaking in a row. So, public speaking, you've got to mix it up as well. You want to stand out in the way you dress. Probably if you were smart, you would probably bring a change of clothing with you. And you might even have 2 jackets in your bag, and you've just seen all the people speaking in front of you and thinking, no one stood out, I need to stand out. Right, I'm going to go with this super bright blue jacket, etc. So, how do you dress in a way that you will be remembered? Number 2, how do you speak in the way that you will be remembered? If everyone is shouting and you speak quietly, you'll probably be remembered. If everyone speaks in a way that is this way, and you speak like this, more than likely, you'll be remembered. The shock appeal is not to be underestimated. There has to be something that they remember about you tomorrow and next week. And probably for 7 or 8 of you at least, there really is nothing to remember you for. You didn't speak in a way that was different to any other person. And I come back to that point, is there are 10 speakers in a row. You've got to stand out somehow. And being the super nice guy from next door, or that nicely dressed girl, because all the girls are nicely dressed and professional in their office attire, you don't stand out. So think about the way that you dress, which maybe is in terms of what is your signature. Also, the message, it has to be simple. I'd like to credit everyone in the audience as being more able and talented. But the truth is, people have a limited ability to process. And if you give them too much information, they're just not going to take it on. It's going to go in one ear and out the rest. So there's nothing that is too much in terms of simplification. Simplify it again, and simplify it again. A really good person to give a speech to is probably your 5-year-old brother or sister. 50 years ago, there was something called academia for academia's sake. One way in which you serviced yourself and proved to everyone that you were a great academic is you wrote in a way that nobody understood. It's like, wow, that is a really bright professor, because I really didn't understand anything he was talking about. Aldous Huxley graduated from Oxford University, one of the great novelists of his time, went to America, and he got a job working for Disney Studios, Walt Disney. But actually, they never published any of his movie reviews, which was quite a puzzle. And there was an interviewer, a reporter at some point who was interviewing me, and they said, who was interviewing Walt Disney, and they said, look, you had Aldous Huxley writing for you, great writer, but why did you never publish any of his reviews? And Walt Disney, in reply to it, said, look, the truth is, I didn't understand every 4th word that he wrote. So he was just too smart and too articulate. And yes, so you can use a rhetoric that impresses people. And in looking at the art of speech, this is where you need to know your audience. And really good politicians, as I said, they change the way they dress. So when Tony Blair goes to speak to the coal miners, he'll take his tie off, or he'll unbutton his tie and loosen it. He'll take his jacket off, he'll roll his sleeves up, because he's trying to convey the idea of what?
Equality?
In a way, yeah, that he's working class. I've rolled my sleeves up, like you, I get the job done, I'm here to work. But he's not going to do that when he goes to speak to the stockbrokers. He's not going to dumb down his Etonian RP accent. At that point, he knows that the stock market will be impressed that he went to Oxford, and that he has the RP, and he went to Eton, he went to Oxford. He knows that that is the place where actually to wear the jacket and to sound like he's got RP is exactly what he should be doing. So when my students go to debate, I sort of say, right, entertain the room, but be very aware of who the judges are. And if there are 3 judges who are female, you should be debating in order to take into account that it is females who will be making the final decision. So you need to think about this. You don't know who your judges are going to be, but you do, because your judges are all teachers. And teachers look at the world in a certain way. They're not paid enough. They're not respected. Teaching students is just a hassle. And the best part of their day is the weekend and the holidays. I'm exaggerating. I think the vast majority of teachers who are there because they love their students and are passionate about their topic. But to think about the audience and to think about the judges is important. And then, how do you engage an audience? And I think there were probably 2 or 3 students who did something that was a little bit different. Okay, you all use quotes. When you use quotes, don't assume that people know who you're quoting. So if you believe that not everyone in the room knows that person you're quoting, then do what some of you did, which was actually to say who that person was. So if everyone knows who Henry Kissinger is, you don't need to provide, in parenthesis, any additional information. But if not everyone in the room knows that person, then actually that quote is lost. Because in journalism, unless you know who it is, don't quote them at all. And if you are quoting someone that people don't know, at least let them know this person was the head of this committee, this organization, wrote this book which was monumental to a change in thought. So when you're quoting, choose your quotes carefully and also ensure that people know who you're quoting. Personalize your content. I think 2 or 3 did that well, and I think those who get in the top 3, I think they personalize the content better than anyone else. Okay. A lot of you were very good with your research, but I think these days the world's been through a series of changes in terms of leadership. And I think that leading from the pulpit is an era that is kind of behind us. And they talk about a 5th generation leader who is actually leading from behind. They tend to be pushing people forward and developing leadership. And they say that one of the most important things of someone who's leading in that style, and I've seen it talked about a lot, and even some of the top universities have published articles in the last few months saying the number one thing for leadership these days is something that I think would never have been considered that even 5 years ago. It's showing your vulnerability. And I think there were a couple of students, 2 in particular, out of the 10, who showed their vulnerability. And it could come across that they're not confident, and it could come across as that they are not developed in the way that they're speaking. But more often than not these days, it comes across in that actually they're a real person. And you think when you're flicking through your multimedia pages, that you're looking for someone who's real, because we're tired of looking at people who aren't real. They're not real in the message they deliver, and they're not real in the way that they dress. So, they're trying to create a facade and a face in front of them. So that 5th generation leader, level 5 leader, is someone who's comfortable to be wrong, someone who's comfortable to make mistakes, someone who's comfortable to actually let people inside. And I'm directly involved in recruitment in my school. And one of the people wrote back to me who we were advertising a leadership position. And he said, why didn't I get the job? Why I made the shortlist. And I said exactly that to him. I said, look, I was looking for a person. And when we asked you the questions, you had these very generic answers. So you knew what to say. But actually, I wanted someone that I felt would be a person that my students and colleagues could connect with. And by the end of the interview, I really didn't know who you were as a person. You gave me great answers, but I didn't actually know what you stood for or who you are as a person. And I'd rather have someone that I know who they are and I get a sense of who they are than someone who's just trying to say everything correctly. It's one thing that I like actually about the British ambassador to Romania, Andrew Noble. We've had some great ambassadors to Romania. I think they're all good. And I've known them all in the last 4 ambassadors we had. And I guess it's probably wrong to pick favorites, but what I do like about Andrew Noble is he's very approachable, he's very personable. At no time do you feel that he's talking down to you. You feel like he's talking, and actually that's one thing that they said they loved about Queen Elizabeth II, is that she would take the time to speak to the person on the gate. Everyone said that she was there for everyone. So to be vulnerable is important, and to be original. And I think that maybe comes back to our original point. And I think also to reward the audience as well. And I think, sometimes, you ask rhetorical questions, you engage the audience in terms of you ask them questions. And that's important. You involve them by using the second person. I think a lot of you are using the second person, but I think you could use the first person plural a little bit more. You know, you is engaging, but we is together. And it's just, I think it's a more powerful message when it's we than because you is a divide, isn't it? They're there, it's a dichotomy. I'm here, you're there, and there's something dividing us. But we, and if you look at the great speeches, you know, Kennedy, he gives the I, the first person personal, because if you're a person in the public eye, people are hungry for personal knowledge. They want to know about you as a person. You know, and that's why we, you know, have journalists out there seeking to take pictures, private pictures of these public figures in their personal lives, which, you know, is a very fine line. You look at someone like Princess Diana, you know, ultimately paid the price of that because she was being hounded by the media and ended up dying. So there's a very fine line. But I think someone in the public eye, they know that they have to give a certain amount of public content because the audience are hungry for it. But Kennedy, once he did that, right, I've given you my pound of flesh, it transpired straight from I to we. And I think the speech really has to be we. It has to be us together. And the closer you can stand to the audience or draw the audience in, anything that forms that connection is probably the right thing to do in the speech. So, once again, well done to everyone. I think rhetoric is a lifetime journey. Sometimes they say, you know that you've reached the end of your journey when you come back to the beginning. And many times I felt like that myself, even as a head of school. Some days I go into school and I think, I've been a head of school for 12 years. And some days I just think, how did I ever end up here? Because I really feel like today is my first day as head of school. I think you go through life never feeling that you quite achieve what it is you want to achieve. And you'll have days that you feel like you're an imposter, and you'll just think, and I've heard many of my friends say this to me, that just think, I don't feel like I'm experienced enough to be leading people. But I think that also is a good position, because then you don't make assumptions and you don't make presumptions. And you never think that you're better than anyone else. And it means that actually you're with people. You are one of the we. So regardless of the outcome, by the way, and I say this to my daughter, I say this to everyone I know, trophies and certificates you can print yourself. Trophies, you can go to any store and probably for about 50 RON. You can make a trophy and put it on your shelf. So you could have 50 trophies up there, and that might look impressive. But what you're really trying to develop in these events is skills. And whilst it's nice to have that public approval, when someone's saying you're good or you're not good, I really do believe at the end of the day, even though we could only pick one person to go forward, don't let that defeat you in terms of who you are and where you're going. Don't walk out today thinking I wasn't good enough. Just think, those people didn't see the value in me today in the way that I feel that it was there. So, don't walk out the door thinking you weren't in the top 4 or 5. Walk out the door thinking, I was number 1, but just not in their eyes. Number 1 with work to be done so that maybe they need to see it. But I think you always need to have that confidence that actually that what you did was well. And you are in the final. So you got through your school round, you got through your regional round. There were 100 of you that were here yesterday, and only 10 of you made the final. So I think everyone here has qualities that show that you've got the ability to be a great public speaker. But maybe the journey is not finished for you. The last thing I'd like to do is just to say thank you to Ella, because she organises and it's a bit harder for her to be here this year because she's now a proud mum. Yeah. So in every other version she was coming here as an individual, and now she's had to leave her daughter behind, so she's here. So thank you, Ella, and thank you for inviting me back, and good luck to everyone.